guys, what is going on? Red Mash here, and welcome back to the episode of Cards and Castles Tier Lists, where today we'll be heading up into the newest faction of Cards and Castles, and that is the Druids. Now, there isn't a lot of sort of cards to go over for this faction, to be honest. They are fairly new, and a lot of them, of course, actually were taken from other factions upon creation, so there's not many quote-unquote new cards from the Enchanted Grove that were really used to support the Druid faction. But nonetheless, let's take a look at the faction overall and see where some of these cards rank. Alright, so the first card I wanted to talk about is Adaptive Armor. Now, Adaptive Armor is only one of two Druid trap cards that are currently available to use for the faction. But between the two, Adaptive Armor is not only one of the worst traps for the faction. It's not, the worst out of the, well, it is the worst out of the two, but it's also like one of the worst overall when you're looking at actually a lot of other different traps. Now, the reason I classify this as sort of an F ranking, one that you should never really use, is because of, what Adaptive Armor is doing. When a unit is attacked, it gains +3 spirit, +3 health, and Spirit Link. Now, the 3 health is okay, but the Spirit Link, even though it's a great, ability, especially when you're using it to direct sort of these bigger attacks, say, if you have a Mana Core out and like this 20 unit or 20 attack unit tries to hit the castle, it'll go towards that Spirit Link. It'll go towards that Mana Core. But the reason Adaptive Armor is, very weak and very, why I consider it an F tier, is not only because of the fact that you could also redirect this trap very easily, like, the main flaw with all traps, but because it's not really doing a lot to help you when you're, when you have a unit out and when you have a unit that's attacked, usually the opponent's going to go for the one that you value the most at that moment. So when Adaptive Armor is used, and lo and behold, now the opponent, you might have gotten 3 health on your monster, but your opponent is still attacking it. Plus, it now has Spirit Link, so all the other sort of trays that would have happened are going to end up affecting your sort of creature. It might strave off 1 or 2 attacks, but overall, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. And again, playing this at 3 gold, 3 gold is again a point I consider a critical, moment in the match, and you don't want to waste it just making sure one guy might have Spirit Link, and that guy might be a target that you want to use for later, and to see him just now openly being able to, being openly able to be attacked, I think if I pronounced that right, by anyone, it just doesn't seem like a very good card to me. And again, just 3 gold it's not worth the price. Spirit Link, okay. 3 health, okay, but I mean, the way that this can be redirected and immediately backfire, I consider this an F tier card. Alright, so let's look at the other end of the spectrum now that we talked about Adaptive Armor and go right to Seed of Regrowth. So, this is, of course, the other trap that is involved in the faction aside from Adaptive Armor. And I think it's a much, much better trap, overall, overall, than the Adaptive Armor. Now, the Seed of Regrowth, for one, is a 3 gold trap, like all traps, of course, but it summons a fully healed Trent when your unit is destroyed. Now, that is actually very, very big. Usually, when you have a unit that dies off at this point early on, it might be a weak unit. It could be a Salahar Rider, it could be a Lumberjack, or maybe something a little expensive, maybe a Hassan City Guard, etc., whatever the case may be. But when one of those units dies, they're now going to be placed with a fully health injured Trent, which of course is at a 3/5 base stat. Directly, if it's not directly on the castle, it will be very, very close, assuming that the deck that uses Seed of Regrowth is an aggro based deck, meaning that they are going to be pushing all that they can right from the start. And again, that's where we find most Seed of Regrowth plays, actually, usually in Druid Warlock or Druid Viking. But even then, if you are running a different sort of Druid deck, it doesn't hurt to throw in Seed of Regrowth. It is a very accessible card to a lot of people. It is a common after all. But, I consider it a very, very useful and awesome card for the faction. Being able to have that unit, it's pretty much the only, I think, except for one other trap card that can actually summon a unit. The second one, I think, being camouflage in the ninjas, which you have to have your face get attacked for that, which may not be worth it if the attack coming in is 6 attack or 10 attack. It could be it's very risky for that kind of play. But with Seed of Regrowth, I think it's a much better way. Sacrifice a weaker or damaged unit for a fully health one very close to your opponent's face at no less. It's such a great card. The reason why, though, I do mark this as an A tier, not an S tier personally, is due to the fact that it could be very easily diverted. Like all traps are, they kind of all share that same flaw of, hey, I can just easily divert this by attacking this first, or doing this before this. So, if your opponent can just think for a second and then just realize, oh, it could be a Seed of Regrowth, and then correctly adapt to that play, that's why Seed of Regrowth could backfire, and hence it's not an S tier ranking card. But A tier nonetheless, because I think it is a very solid card for Druid decks. And with that being said, let's move on to our next card. And that next card is going to be Fenrir. Now, Fenrir is, of course, one of 3 Druid Legends currently available for the faction, but he is marked as an S tier for a very important reason. So, taking a look at Fenrir, it is a 5 gold unit that has Rampage and gains 1 attack whenever any unit on the board is injured, given a 3/5 base stat. So, first of all, you might be thinking, well, the stat line for his base might be a little weaker, considering that Injured Trent has the same stats for a much, much lower cost. And now, while that's true, Fenrir's real power lies in that +1 attack, and, well, the Rampage. It's a unit that can easily move around the board, slowly gaining the, required attack to eventually make some sort of big push, or make either a big push or a big trade, whatever the case may be. It's sort of like that ticking time bomb that needs to be addressed, that no burn from Warlock can immediately address. The only sort of removal that can instantly get rid of Fenrir are cards like, I think, Murder and Mercenary Execution. The highest Warlock burn spell is a 4 damage spell, either the Witch Bolt or Blue Firebolt. So the fact that it's not easily removable and he could just run around the board, slowly gaining a lot of attack, is a very scary premise. And that's really what Druid decks are sort of focusing on at the moment for their solid win conditions. It's just building up a massive Fenrir, and then adding a scope onto that, or movement spells to make sure you can hit face instantly. Things like that just make this card such a dangerous, dangerous card. And his diversity, he can fit into nearly any Druid deck, regardless if you're playing aggression, if you've got the pirates going on for some ramp greed, you're running ninjas for bounce, whatever the case may be, you're going to find at least one Fenrir in the deck if your opponent can carry it. It is a legend, of course. But yeah, that's sort of my take on Fenrir as an S tier. Very powerful card and a very potent card for all Druid decks. So obviously, I think that really classifies it as an S tier card, along with all of what it can do. So that being said, with Fenrir covered, let's move on into our next card. Now our next one is going to be a bit odd. It is, of course, the Ancient Arbor. Now, for this tier list, I actually marked off the Arbor as a B tier card. Because, of course, it's got some big downsides. But I did want to take a moment to really showcase the Arbor while I'm here. Despite that it's a B tier card, I was really debating on whether or not this card would actually move into an A tier, which would be surprising overall for the faction, seeing as how already I think there are 3 A tier and 1 S tier currently. So yeah, that kind of says, with the limited cards of Druid, just taking a separate sidetrack off of Ancient Arbor, the fact that they have these kind of rankings with such a small amount of cards really shows you the untapped potential of a Druid deck, or the Druid faction as a whole. But anyway, going back to what Ancient Arbor is about, of course for 6 gold it is an 8/8 slow moving unit. But don't let that really take away from what Arbor can do. I didn't mark it off as a B tier due to the fact that it's going to be slow, and that's definitely going to hurt the Arbor. But its stat line for its cost is something that is really amazing, and what really should people should use Ancient Arbor for. An 8/8 on the board is definitely scary, and it's one of the most, I think, I wouldn't want to say overstated, but it's the most powerful baseline static unit. You know, only second to, I think, Dremoth and maybe like one other card that maybe I'm not thinking of right now. But that really goes to show you what, how powerful Ancient Arbor is. So, despite that you might have slow, something as easy as a Shushi Shack or, an easy movement spell like Lunging Attack could automatically change how Ancient Arbor is played. Or Nimble Retreat, actually. +3 movement on an Ancient Arbor, and you've got a 4 movement 8/8 zipping around the board and then immediately putting that onto face. I may want to experiment with that now. Well, we'll see later. But anyway, I just want to kind of bring the Ancient Arbor up to you guys. I know it's not, again, a super, awesome card. It's a pretty basic card, but I think the stats are something to highlight for this card nonetheless. And it goes to show the further untapped potential of the Druid faction. And for our final card with this Druid tier list, we're going to be looking at Archdruid Liana. Now, Liana is the second of the 3, or the kind of last of 3, depending on how you look at it, of the legends for the Druid faction. And I feel like she's, again, one of those underrated legends, sort of like Rusty Hooks and John Viev, that people don't really look at. But that's probably because they don't really have the Liana to add to their collection. So what Liana does is she has an initiative ability of summoning 2 Trents at full health, and then giving them Spirit Link to boot. Now, that, I think, is a very deadly combination that I think a lot of people look over. So, to paint this picture out, for those who might not understand what Liana's power is, she essentially summons 2 Trents, creating a 10 health Spirit Link wall for any opponent to get past before they actually hit their intended targets. That's very, very big. Not to mention, with already cards like Armory or any sort of health gaining spells. I want to throw out Brewery, but Brewery is sort of a basic building. But cards like Brewery and Armory can automatically increase this card's power tremendously. And not to mention, you're also getting Liana at that 3/3/3, 3 movement, 3 attack, 3 movement. And again, following up with buffs that could be even more deadly. So I do mark her as an A tier. I think the only thing holding her back is her cost. It's a very risky play to throw it all on Liana. You're going to have to make sure your board is established before you throw out Liana, or else she's not going to... Those Spirit Link Trents aren't going to really be defending much, except for maybe Liana if you try to push her aggressively in place of any other board presence. But overall, I think it's another one of those understated legends, or not understated, underused legends that could make a much more dangerous impact in the ladder if people wanted to experiment with that more. With that being said, guys, that's going to do it for this Druid tier list. If you guys did enjoy, please sure to leave a like on the video, share with your friends, and comment down below your thoughts on this faction. I know it's a very small tier list, this video, but, the Druids are a very new faction, so I don't really have a lot of new cards to really look at and examine when compared to all of the other current factions. But speaking of tier lists, of course, the tier list for Druids will be in the description below. So if you want to read the full tier list and see my thoughts on the faction as a whole, again, just scroll down to the description while you're down there. If you haven't done so already, leave a comment, like I said. But not only that, also subscribe if you're new. If you haven't done so already, help support the channel, help us grow. All by clicking that subscribe button at no additional cost to you. So that being said, guys, until next time, that's all from me for now. So, again, until next time, stay gaming.